talking point for people who are big Trump fans is that Trump forced the North Koreans to the table with all of this language. That Trump showed he wasn't going to budge, and now the North Koreans are going to come to the table and they're going to cave. That seems unlikely to me. It seems more like this is a calculated ploy by the North Koreans to gain concessions from the West in exchange for an empty promise. The reason I say this is because this has been the North Korean way of doing business for nigh on 60 years at this point. They've constantly threatened the West. They've constantly gotten concessions. They've constantly gotten cash and food and even nuclear help under the 1994 framework, North Korea, negotiated by Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter. Under all of that, the North Koreans have always gained and the West has always lost. The North Koreans have never felt the need to give up their nuclear program. They've continued to progress their nuclear program even as we continue to sign checks to them. So this all started yesterday with the South Korean security advisor Jong, I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, but he said that North Korea is now committed to denuclearization. I'll explain what he means by this in a second, because if you read the headline, that sounds great. North Korea is going to get rid of its nukes. If you know what he means, it's not that great. Here's what he had to say.
I told President Trump that in our meeting, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he is committed to denuclearization. Kim pledged that North Korea will refrain from any further nuclear or missile tests. He understands that the routine joint military exercises between the Republic of Korea and the United States must continue.
Okay, so basically that's the South Korean government saying, well, Kim said he's not going to fire any more ICBMs or test any more missiles. Well, we're not super worried about the test at this point. We're worried about the continued development of the technology, because he can restart the test anytime he wants. A promise to stop tests so that he can get in the room with Trump and get a picture walking out with Trump and show his own people that he is a powerful leader on par with Trump is fine with him. I mean, if that means 6 weeks of refraining from firing missiles, he can probably handle that. Remember, it's already the middle of March. May is coming up really quickly. So so basically he's promised that for the next 6 weeks he won't fire a missile. Whoop-de-doo. Whoop-de-doo. When he says that North Korea is committed to denuclearization, understand the absolute stated program of the North Korean government is we want denuclearization of the entire peninsula. What that means is we want the United States to remove its troops from South Korea. So we'll get rid of our nuclear program if and only if the United States removes its troops from South Korea and the United States stops engaging in military exercises with the South Koreans. I think that Kim wants to make that pitch directly to Trump. He wants to say, listen, we can walk out of here with the greatest deal. You'll win the Nobel Peace Prize. Right? We'll walk out of here and you'll have been the guy who disarmed the Kim regime, and I'll have been the guy who allowed the Korean peninsula to finally stand up on its own. He can make a nationalist appeal to Trump, and it would be a bad move by Trump because, again, if the United States does not have troops in South Korea, this radically changes the situation on the ground, not only militarily, but in terms of economics and trade, in terms of foreign policy, spheres of influence, protection of particular trade corridors. Right? All of this goes in by the wayside if the United States were to pull its troops out of South Korea, which is why we've never really considered it before. It's possible, however, that Trump falls for that routine. So the question in Trump meeting with North Korea is this Trump and Gorbachev, right? Is this Reagan and Gorbachev, where Reagan basically strong-arms Gorbachev and refuses to make concessions to Gorbachev? Or is this Nixon to China? Is this Trump goes to the North Koreans and the North Koreans lie to him and then he buys it because now he's going to get a political win out of it? Well, it certainly sounds like Trump is very positive about all of this. He sees this as a big win. Here's Trump talking about North Korea acting very positively all of a sudden.
We're going to see. They seem to be acting positively, but we're going to see. We'll know, and I'm willing to go, as you probably noticed this morning, where we sent out through social media a statement, willing to go either way. Hopefully it's going to be the proper way. The proper way is the way that everybody knows and everybody wants.
Okay, so this is all very nice and very happy-dappy-do. He tweeted something out similar yesterday about North Koreans. He said, great progress is being made. He said, Kim Jong-un talked about denuclearization with the South Korean representatives, not just a freeze. Also, no missile testing by North Korea during this period of time. Great progress being made, but sanctions will remain until an agreement is reached. Meeting being planned. Okay, so he sounds very positive about all of this. And the way that Trump fans are playing this is that Trump has won, right? The little rocket man blinked. This is what Sean Hannity says, that Trump has shellacked Kim Jong-un into surrender. Of course, this is what Sean is going to say. Sean is a big Trump fan, and obviously he thinks everything Trump does is a work of magnificent genius. Here was his take.
Major breaking news tonight, a huge foreign policy win for President Trump. Little rocket man blinks. Now, the president's tough rhetoric, his bold action, his severe sanctions, they appear to be working tonight. President Trump is accepting an invitation to meet with the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un by May, and Pyongyang is agreeing to stop all nuclear and missile tests while these talks are underway, and the sanctions, they will continue.
Okay, that is not exactly the correct take, I think. I think the idea that there is a big blink here by Kim, the question is, what is Kim giving up? And the answer is nothing. Right? Kim is giving up nothing, and he's going to get a picture with Trump walking out arm in arm, hands outraised, right, like Neville Chamberlain and Adolf Hitler. And, you know, that's a real possibility. The question here is, are those fabled negotiation skills of Trump so magical? Is he really going to be able to get into a room with Kim and then get Kim to denuclearize, and we retain all of our troops there? We still have sanctions that snap back into place if something should go wrong. We still have verifiability of their denuclearization. Are all those things really going to happen? Do you think they're really going to happen? Because I'm very skeptical they're going to happen. I'm very skeptical the Kim regime is going to give up all of that just because Trump tweeted some nasty things about Kim. It doesn't make any real politic sense. Like, play Kim for a second. Get yourself out of the American political context and play Kim for a second. Imagine that you are Kim Jong-un for a second. Let's get out of Trump's head. We spend so much time in American politics in the head of Donald Trump, which is a weird place. Now, let's be real. It's kind of a weird place. An even weirder place is the Kim regime. But I'm not convinced, and I've never been convinced, that the Kim regime is crazy. I've never been convinced that Kim Jong-un is a crazy guy. It seems to me that he is a person who is out for self-preservation and preservation of his evil regime. Now, if you are him, and you are looking around, if you were he, and you were looking around at the world, and you were thinking to yourself, how can I ensure that I maintain power and that I stay in power for the rest of my life? And the first thing you would do is develop nuclear weapons. Right? That is the very first thing that you would do, because that would ensure that there is a deterrent. That should the United States attack you, you threaten to nuke Seoul, and that's the end of it. Right? You get to stay, because no one wants Seoul nuked. No one wants 100,000 people dead in the middle of Seoul, even if it means liberating the North Korean people who've been subjugated for decades on end. So you want your nuclear weapons. But what you also want is economic support from the West. You want them signing checks to you. And so what you do is every so often, you offer to give up your nuclear weapons, and you say, you know, we'll give those things right up. You know, we'll make concessions to you. Just sign us some checks. Remove the sanctions. Sign us some checks. We won't do any testing. We won't fire missiles. We won't test our bombs. And then you spend the next 3 years in the bunker developing new weapons. And then 3 years later, you come out and you do the same routine. And there are new sanctions, it's another round of sanctions, and you've shown the world that you're strong and that they're deterred. That's the way this logic works. It's not illogical what Kim is doing. It's not. I mean, threatening the United States sounds illogical. It's not illogical, because the whole point of him threatening the United States is to prevent the United States from invading his country and sacking him, or prevent the North Koreans themselves from sacking him. Right? That's the whole point here. So why does he want to meet with Trump? Because, again, it gives him that sort of legitimacy. Now, what's funny is you're seeing the left-wing media very excited about all this. Erin Burnett said that if Trump solves North Korea, he will be seen as a great president. Here's what she had to say.
All right. Well, thanks very much to all of you. Just an extraordinary evening, and, of course, opening the door to the big question. If President Trump can truly solve this problem, that would be going down as a great president. And there's no way around that. That is the reality here. Okay, well, is that the reality, or is it just that you are going to celebrate that? And if that's the case, if that's what Trump is going for, if what Trump really wants out of life is this big win, then I'm not sure exactly, how he doesn't get played by Kim. The way that you negotiate best is when you're willing to walk away from the table. The question now is Trump going to be willing to walk away from the table? That's questionable. That's questionable. I'll explain why in just a second. So there are a bunch of good commentary pieces out about what's happening right now. The biggest problem here is that you can see a situation in which Trump goes into the meeting. An offer is made by Kim. It's not a good offer. It's an offer like, get all the troops out of South Korea and we will denuclearize. And Trump says, sure, let's do it. Because, hell, I don't really like this alliance with South Korea all that much anyway. I've made noises along those lines. There's a good piece by Thomas Wright over at The Atlantic talking about all of this, pointing out that Trump is not oriented toward the alliance with North Korea in a particularly strong way. Wright says, since the mid-1980s, he has argued that America's alliances are a bad deal. Initially, his wrath was focused on Japan and the Arab states, but in 2013, he said, how long will we go on defending South Korea from North Korea without payment? When will they start to pay us? And then he said, in 2015, we have 28,000 soldiers on the line in South Korea. Between the madman and them, we get practically nothing compared to the cost of this. So maybe he will get to withdraw troops, which he wants, in exchange for an end to ICBM testing, which he also wants. You could see Trump making this deal. It would be bad for the United States because that's bad policy. It's possible that he plays this as America first. And it's also possible that Trump is ego invested.
And that wouldn't be unique to Trump. One of the big problems with meeting with dictators, like the dictators of Iran, one of the biggest problems here is that when you do that, you end up in a situation where if you do not proclaim a win, it is seen as a political loss. So when President Obama spent an awful lot of time negotiating a deal with the Iranian mullahs, with the worst people on earth, it gave him a stake in then proclaiming that they were not actually violating law. It gave him a stake in pretending that Iran was a moderate state. So remember, the whole pitch in Iran that was pushed by Ben Rhodes, that liar par excellence, the lie was that the Iranians had moderated and that they wanted to meet with us because they had moderated. And then we made concessions to them because they had moderated. And our concessions would make them further moderate. None of that was true. They're just as extreme and radical and evil as they always have been. The Iranian government has always been this. They have not changed one iota. They have, if anything, strengthened their pro-terror regime. But all of Obama's acolytes will still tell you that Obama maintained the moderation of the regime, that Obama pushed that regime toward the center. The reason being that Obama was invested in the success of his deal. And if it turned out that Iran basically just screwed him and took the money and ran, then Obama looks like a sucker. Well, Trump may feel the same sort of thing. If he gets in a room with Kim, there's two possibilities. He walks out of the room pissed, or he walks out feeling like he's won something. The media cheer him, he wins a Nobel Peace Prize, and then he spends the rest of his presidency talking about how North Korea has moderated under his influence. That's a serious possibility here. And it's not a serious reality. I just don't think North Korea is going to change anytime soon. I don't think they're going to open up. I don't think that we're looking at Gorbachev and Kim Jong-un. I don't think that we're looking at anything remotely like that. Now, again, maybe I'm totally wrong. It's possible. It's possible that Trump is the creature of genius that his supporters suggest he is. Noah Rothman at Commentary says, sometimes it takes an outsider unburdened by the stifling conventions and preconceptions that impede the practice of diplomacy to see the obvious. Trump is that outsider. Sometimes Trump's distance from diplomacy's precepts allow him to see its hobgoblins as they are. That was the case when his administration threw away custom by deciding again to consign North Korea to the list of state terror sponsors, to institute a renewed sanctions regime targeting Iran, and to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. Noah Rothman, by the way, is not a Trump fan. He really does not like Trump. But what he's saying here is possible, right? The risk that professional diplomats feared would result from these maneuvers never materialized, and only a risk-prone executive could have achieved these successes. Trump's particular facility is not without its dangers. Sometimes the conventional wisdom is conventional for a reason. Donald Trump's decision to sit down with North Korea's Kim Jong-un at Pyongyang's request, for example, is fraught with more potential for risk than reward. So here is the risk. He says, on Thursday night, Trump said that he'd received a letter from the North Korean despot, from the South Koreans, and he said that he had been willing to sit down with him. And Trump's defenders say that this isn't a concession, but here's the problem. The arrangement is already a lopsided one in North Korea's favor, and the stakes only get higher from here. This is the big one. It's a gambit that could pay off, but the United States gets only one shot at this. If it fails, American losses will not be minimal. The meeting between the leader of the free world and the criminal proprietor of the world's largest open-air prison might produce a breakthrough. Trump might convince Kim to agree to the permanent and verifiable dismantling of his nuclear program, thus surrendering the only leverage that got North Korea to the table in the first place. Kim's long-range missile program might be on the table for the first time in 20 years. In exchange, Trump could offer diplomatic recognition, a peace treaty, or sanctions relief. A grand bargain is possible in theory. But, is that likely? Is that likely? It could also, if the maneuver were to fail or return to dialogue at lower functionary levels or even through back channels, might be regarded as a fruitless pursuit, which leaves the United States with only one viable way to neutralize the North Korean nuclear program. So there's a lot of risk to all of this. Again, I don't think Trump is versed enough in these things to pull off a major diplomatic coup. I am perfectly happy to change my mind if he does so. I'm open to the idea that this is all a work of genius. It's possible. Do I think that it's likely? I do not think that it is likely. I think this is more risk than reward. And I think that, again, this comes down more to political considerations than it does to genius manipulation.
We will make America great again.